Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome. Today's topic is Resalest Remarkable Books number 60. The first book today is The Life of Charles W. Denko, PhD, MD, by Joan D. Denko, MD, MS, 2013. This is a tremendous book. It was written by a very good friend of mine, Dr. Joan Denko. She was our neighbor on Avalon Drive. Real wonderful woman. She's very, very knowledgeable. We had a wonderful friendship based on books. She also loves reading books. This is a book that she wrote, a biography of her husband, his life, who had a fascinating, inspiring life. He was the son of poor Russian immigrants, and he developed polio as a boy. So that he had this handicap, which was hard for him to walk. He used to think one leg was longer than the others. However, he was very determined to succeed. He became a distinguished doctor and arthritis researcher. And actually, Charles and Joan, they fathered three children, Chris, Nick, and Tim. Chris, I grew up with for a time. And this Charles Denko was a world traveler, really inspiring because he was really determined, to succeed in life. He worked hard and did very well, and he made a lot of big contribution to arthritis research. Also, in the Second World War, he was involved in. There was a movie made about something that he did. They were back then. They had this. The new wonder drug was penicillin, and people knew how powerful it was. And then there were some people who were getting used bottles of penicillin and then putting like some solution in them, which was like fake. So he got involved. He thought this was problematic. People were getting sick from it. So he got involved in destroying these empty bottles so that people would be protected from those who would mischievously take advantage of sick people who needed help but needed real penicillin, not just something from some solution in a bottle. So wonderful, very inspiring. He's a good guy. He's a very patient, kind fellow, good man, Charles Denko. The next book is Envy, a survey of its psychology and history by Victoria C.G. Greenleaf, M.D., M.S., 2009. Yeah, this is it's a very important topic, very challenging topic. Envy, when people, see some, it's a bad trait. It's a bad quality when someone has something that you want but feel that you can't have or can't develop, and then you have ill will for that person, or even might do things to hurt them. And this is it's really interesting because people often they won't admit that they are envious. That they'll just say, "Oh, that person, they'll think negative thoughts about that person." Very destructive. It's a very destructive thing, and boy, it causes so many problems. And so she decided to research all about it. She did a lot of work, and it's tough. It's a depressing subject, and it's a reality of life that we all have to deal with, especially those who are successful. They have to deal with the envy of others. And so this author did a very good job, really interesting, and even if it's kind of a very troubling topic. The next book is Tim Tebow, Through My Eyes, by Tim Tebow with Nathan Whitaker, 2011. Oh, I really enjoyed this book. Tim Tebow is the famous guy who quarterback and American football quarterback. He played college as a Florida Gator, and then in the NFL he played for he had a magical year for the Denver Broncos in 2011, and then it was very strange. And he became famous because he was a strong Christian. He became actually a very beloved guy, a very hated guy. He was controversial. People who were offended by his outspoken Christianity, and those who really embraced him and rooted for him. And strangely, in 2011, the Denver Broncos started out 1-4. Their quarterback was Kyle Orton, so they had a bad start. And then they turned it over to Tebow. I think he was in his second year. And the rest of the season, the Broncos finished 7-4, and so he did very well. And they made the playoffs. They won the first game of the playoffs. And actually, it went into overtime against Pittsburgh. And the first play of overtime, Tebow threw a touchdown pass. And then they were actually beaten very badly the next game against New England. And so he was extremely popular in Denver. And strangely, right after the season, Denver traded him to the New York Jets. I think the Denver Bronco fans were heartbroken. And then with the Jets, Tebow played very little, and then he was released. And then he tried to try out with the New England Patriots. He was in their training camp. He was really hoping to make the team, and he almost did. He was cut. He was released. And then a couple years later, he went to training camp with the Philadelphia Eagles. Same thing. He looked like he was going to make the team. I remember watching him in a preseason game. Again, they released him. So very strange career. And I kept hoping that the Cleveland Browns would sign him. Well, it never happened. And I guess he's controversial. You talk to some people, and they're convinced how terrible he is. And I think it's just really they're offended by the fact that he's such a good guy and his Christianity. People who really are, you could say, those who are really anti-Christian or anti-religion. Good fella. He was actually born in Makati, Philippines. His parents were American missionaries there. In fact, he almost wasn't born because it was doctor there told his mom to have an abortion, that there was a problem with him when he was in her womb. He was a fetus in her womb. But she decided, she once said, no, I'm not going to do that, and went ahead. And look at this wonderful human being. So he's very much against abortion because of that, of his background. He's a guy who can run. He's a running quarterback. So we'll see. Now he's playing minor league baseball for the New York Mets. I'm rooting for Tim Tebow. I really like him. And the thing is, people, a reality of life, people are sports fans, and it's wonderful if you have a guy who's such a strong Christian, because I think that's the most important thing in life is our spiritual life. And so that's why I thought, he's a good influence. But for these, I guess the different teams thought, they didn't want to deal with all the hoopla and the media frenzy of having him on the team. That's part of the reason he's not in the NFL. And then there's these strong beliefs that, he's no good. He did have a low completion percentage, but I don't know. I think he can play, and it's really a shame that he's out of the NFL because I thought he could play. He's pretty disappointed. But good guy, really good guy, Tim Tebow. God bless him. The next book is Pope Joan by Donna Woolfolk Cross, 1996. This is an amazing book, and it was lent to me by a friend from my parents' church, Eileen Bradfield, friend of our parents. This book makes the case that Pope John Angelicus, who was the Pope of the Catholic Church from 853 to 855 AD, was a woman impersonating a man. So that's why it's called, this is what the author is implying in the case that she's making, that there was a female pope. And she tells the author tells the story of this woman's life. Her mother, Pope Joan, character, her mother was a Saxon, and the father was English. He grew up in Frankland, which is now France. She was very studious as growing up. The thing is, back then, this is really, talk about the old days. This is, more than 1,000 years ago, 1,200 years ago. Back in that era in Europe, girls did not get an education. It was strictly for men. However, she was very studious, and she was very interested in learning. And her father apparently allowed this to happen. There was a Viking invasion at one point. It was devastating. They lived near the ocean in France, what became France. Viking invasion. I believe at some point, I can't remember the details. She had a brother who I think was being pressured to go to study, even though he really didn't like to study. Anyway, she decided to disguise her identity, and because she wanted to study. And the only way she could study was if she was a man. So she cut her hair and started acting like she was a man. She became a monk. She learned medicine, the medicine that they knew of that time. Eventually she moved to Rome, and she became very popular because of her intelligence, knowledge, and medical prowess, and her dedication to the common good. And lo and behold, she was elected pope. Well, and the way it ended is eventually she had a relationship with a man. She got pregnant, and then her secret was going to come out. And according to the story, she died giving childbirth on the street. In other words, the baby came. She was out, and she was terrified that people would find out she was a man, and her secret, because then she couldn't really be Pope anymore. It was a fascinating book, very, very interesting history. Really enjoyed it. The next book is The Smartest Kids in the World and How They Got That Way by Amanda Ripley, 2013. This book was lent to me by a family friend, Dick Donaldson, and it tells a story of how children in Poland, Finland, and South Korea excel in school. So that's the whole point of this book, that those three countries that they have really good educational systems: Poland, Finland, and South Korea. And the author makes the argument that American teachers need to have more prestige to attract talented teachers. Teaching in America doesn't really, of course, it doesn't pay a great amount, but it's also not very prestigious. And what we really need in the United States is for talented young people to go into teaching, because that's how you get really good teachers. One of the problems is that women in the old days, you had women who were restricted in occupation. Teaching was considered a female occupation, and so since women were restricted from other fields, you had really great teachers, these very talented women who would become teachers. And nowadays things have changed. I mean, it's good that women are open, can do anything, but it's really hurt our educational system, because a lot of the talented women don't go into teaching, because doesn't pay as much, and they can make more money doing something else and more prestige. So great teachers make great schools. That's the whole point. Very interesting. I know he talks up here about South Korea, and I don't think we really want to imitate that country's school system, because the kids have very, very extremely long hours in school, and they even they came up with a law. They thought kids were studying too long. They generally go to tutorial centers after school if the parents can afford it, and they made a law in South Korea that those tutorial centers needed to close, I think, by 10 o'clock at night, something like that, and because they thought these kids they need their sleep, and they even raided tutorial centers and made arrests when they found they were teaching kids beyond 10 o'clock p.m. So it's a fascinating topic, education, and that's why I'm always interested in reading about it, because we need to have better schools, and it's about creativity, and so we'll see. And I'm actually people are innovating, so schools I'm sure are getting better and can get better. Fascinating topic. The next book is The Battle for America, 2008, by Dan Balls and Haynes Johnson, 2009. Well, this is all about that U.S. presidential election, 2008. And you had Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and John McCain, Sarah Palin. Eventually you had, it was Barack Obama and his running mate, I can't think of his name right now, and against John McCain and Sarah Palin. So initially, Hillary was, she was a strong candidate, really hoping to be nominated, and she wasn't. She finished second behind Barack Obama. That was a big disappointment for my wife, and among other women. So it looked like there could be a female Democratic nominee, and then it turns out there was a female vice presidential nominee. So very interesting, Barack Obama's charisma, and there was generally an anti-Bush attitude, which made it hard for John McCain. And according to this book, the liberal media, they had Obama mania. People were really, he had this tremendous charisma. And then, so it was an interesting election, because he was relatively young, very charismatic. John McCain was much older and had been a prisoner of war in Vietnam and really suffered. And so I was actually for McCain myself. I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, but so anyway, that's how it turned out. I was surprised. I thought, well, especially if you're a conservative and a Republican, you would favor that nominee of that party. But I thought, look at this guy. I thought John McCain, what he had been through in the Vietnam War, 5 years as a prisoner of war. Nothing could be worse than that. So I felt like he would do the right thing, even if it was unpopular, because I think this is what's important for leaders. And very often they think, oh, what does the public want? They follow public opinion. I think we should do what's right. And eventually you'll earn respect from people if you do that, even if they disagree. The next book is Hammerin' Hank, George Almighty and the Say Hey Kid, the year that changed baseball forever, 1973. Okay, I don't have an author for this. It came out, this book was published in 2008, and so that was the first year I became a baseball fan, followed baseball. You had the designated hitter in the American League. That meant the pitchers were no longer batting. You had a guy who didn't play in the field. He batted for the pitcher, because pitchers aren't very good hitters anyway. It was the last year of Willie Mays, the end of his career. You know, he was such a popular guy, really, for going back to the 50s. And Hank Aaron chasing Babe Ruth and the all-time home run record, which at the end of the year he was one short. And then Charlie Finley with the Oakland A's, you know, they won the World Series that year. So I think George Steinbrenner was buying the Yankees. So interesting baseball year, 1973. The Cincinnati Reds were a good team, Oakland A's, and so forth. Really, really enjoyed this book. The next book is John Adams by David McCullough, 2001. This book is 650 pages long. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. And this was actually the beginning of my research on U.S. American presidents. And actually I started with the second president here with Adams and then went back to the first, Washington. But I read, actually I was at taking care of my mother at the Normandy Apartments, and they had this in the library. I read the copy from the Normandy Apartments library. Very inspiring book. John Adams was the second American president, the man who pushed for the Declaration of Independence more than anyone else. He defended British soldiers from the Boston Massacre because he thought it was the right thing to do. He was U.S. ambassador to France and Holland during the Revolution, trying to get French naval support and Dutch financial support. He was a contributor to the U.S. Constitution, George Washington's vice president, a friend, enemy, then finally friend again of Thomas Jefferson. He had two alcoholic sons. His one son, John Quincy, became the sixth U.S. president. John Adams was very hardworking, studious, patriotic, honest, and brave. And he's a forgotten American hero. I made actually 6 YouTube videos. If you scroll through if you're interested in John Adams, if you want to scroll through the library, the video library, and so this was the beginning of my study of John Adams. Really a forgotten guy, tremendous guy in American history. And yeah, he was the guy who said in the American before the American Revolution, when there was trying to get support, when a lot of people were against, only 1/3 of Americans were in favor of a war of independence. 1/3 were against, 1/3 were undecided. And John Adams, through his speeches and writing, he kept saying the same thing over and over again, that yes, we should do it. We should fight a war of independence so we can be free, and so we don't have to be forever dealing with the foibles and the whims of the British, the caprice of the British. And we should fight a war of independence, and we can win. We can win. We can defeat Great Britain. And therefore, we need to develop state constitutions so we can govern ourselves. An amazing guy, John Adams, second president, really a forgotten hero in American history. And this biography by David McCullough is wonderful, wonderful book. David McCullough is one of the best biographers today and historians, tremendous author and guy. The next book is Washington, A Life by Ron Chernow, 2010. Another outstanding biography. Yeah, Ron Chernow is another amazing historian, biographer of American presidents. This book is 822 pages long, and it is just wonderful. I think this is the best biography of Washington I read. So complete. George Washington, the father of America, the man who led the American Revolution, the 8-year USA War of Independence against Great Britain. If not for George Washington, we would have lost the war because his leadership, leadership's important. And it was a very, very tough war to win. And his leadership was crucial. He faced overwhelming problems, an army not being paid, who were often hungry, poorly clothed, cold, and depressed. And so he was the guy who had to keep things together, keep the morale up, keep going despite overwhelming problems. George Washington endured. He kept going. Yeah, and we won the war. Then later he helped create the U.S. Constitution, because after the war we really were not one country yet. And then he didn't want to do that. He was really worn out from the war, very, very tired. He really suffered in the American Revolution. And then he served as the first U.S. president for 8 years. Again, he didn't want to do that because he was happy at Mount Vernon. He had his home, his farm. He enjoyed the great outdoors. But he felt, okay, they said, we need you. So he served as the first U.S. president. He really sacrificed for his country. He's the father of the American mule. Another thing, a mule it comes from a mating of a female horse with a male donkey, and it actually has it's stronger than a horse, but it's as strong as a donkey, but has the submissiveness of a horse. So Mount Vernon, his famous home, he was a farmer, slave owner who freed his slaves at the end of his life. He had feuds with John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison. He was honest, brave, kind, and patient. Yeah, the main thing about George Washington is his character. He was a good guy. He was strong-willed. He was patient, hardworking, determined. He was humble. He was kind. He cared about people. The guys in the war, the soldiers who were suffering so much in the war, they knew he cared about them, and that meant so much to keeping the morale up enough so that the army could stay together and they could win the war. And so an amazing guy. He really needs to be remembered more in our country, the father of our country, because that's why these historians do a tremendous job, these biographers who bring these people to life, because I think George Washington's life is inspiring and can inspire us today to do our part to keep America going. Wonderful, amazing book. The next book is Thomas Jefferson, The Art of Power by John Meacham, 2012. John Meacham is another one of these famous historians and biographers of American presidents, and this is a wonderful book. Amazing. This is about the third president of the United States, the author of the Declaration of Independence, the governor of Virginia during the American Revolution, ambassador to France during the French Revolution, vice president under John Adams, the third president. And as president, he made the Louisiana Purchase from France, which doubled the size of the United States. He sent the Lewis and Clark team west on that trip of exploration to see what was out there. He's the founder of the University of Virginia. Thomas Jefferson was a Renaissance man who loved learning, feared monarchy, and believed in democracy. He loved people and was a political genius. He reconciled with John Adams. They became political enemies when they ran actually against each other twice for president. And the second time, Jefferson defeated Adams. So there were hard feelings, but it was nice that they reconciled, even though they never saw each other again. But they exchanged very warm letters. And they both died on July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776. Thomas Jefferson's words changed the world. All men are created equal. And he was heroic, inspirational, a patriot. He promoted religious freedom. Another tremendous thing he did for our country. Major reason why we became a land of religious freedom and avoided all the problems of other countries where you have religious fighting and abuse of one religion over another. And we attracted talented people from many different religions who contributed to American greatness. He believed in education. Yeah, he loved to learn. Thomas Jefferson read a lot of books. He was devoted to learning, and boy, he did so much for our country. And another inspiring president, Thomas Jefferson. Wonderful book. The next book is James Madison and the Making of America by Kevin R.C. Gutzman, 2012. Well, you can see I was going through the presidents. James Madison was the fourth American president. And he's the father of the U.S. Constitution. Wow, because that's when we became one country. And James Madison, as a young man, he decided that government was important, and he wanted to learn everything he could about government. And that knowledge, that learning, was the foundation of what became the U.S. Constitution in 1787 at Philadelphia. An amazing guy. Became knowledgeable. He was the leader and the clock spring behind the Constitutional Convention in 1787, he worked very hard for its ratification in Virginia. He had to fight Patrick Henry, who was the political boss of Virginia, who was against it. He also was an author of, Madison was an author of many of the Federalist Papers, which were designed to get public support for the Constitution. And then he served as U.S. President elected in 1808 and reelected in 1812. His wife, Dolly Madison, was very, a wonderful woman, very popular, very active, really outgoing, loved people, tremendous woman, and a huge political asset for Madison. Again, I have a video. If you're interested in more, I have videos about Madison. I think 6 videos. Also, Washington. So far, we've done George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe. Next Monday, we're going to start doing John Quincy Adams. James Madison was 5'0", a very short fellow. He was shy, smart, hardworking, and patriotic. He, along with Thomas Jefferson, they were the guys who played a major role in the United States becoming a land of religious freedom. He also prosecuted the War of 1812, which was a really tough thing for our country. But, we got through it. He got a lot of help from James Monroe. That was a tough war. And so his big contribution was the U.S. Constitution, helping the United States become one country. Amazing life. Tremendous biography of James Madison. The next book is The Last Founding Father, James Monroe and a Nation's Call to Greatness by Harlow Giles Unger, 2009. This book has 352 pages. It's about the 5th American president. And this is a tremendous biography. James Monroe served in the U.S. Revolutionary War, was seriously wounded at the critical Battle of Trenton, New Jersey in December 1776. He endured the cruel winter at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia in 1778 with George Washington. He became a congressman, a diplomat to England and France, governor of Virginia. His wife, Elizabeth, got Lafayette's wife out of jail in France during the Reign of Terror in Paris in the French Revolution, when James Monroe was U.S. ambassador there. During the War of 1812, when President James Madison was overwhelmed and shattered by the demands of the presidency and the disasters of the war, especially the burning of Washington City, Monroe played a major role then in helped turning things around. He was positive, energetic, diligent, patriotic. Monroe rebuilt the U.S. military, raised money, and helped end the war successfully. He established national security against England, France, Spain, and American Indians. He acquired Florida. The security that he was able to create allowed a flood of settlers to move into the Midwest. Ohio, Tennessee, Illinois, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee became states as a result of all those people moving in. There was an economic boom. He helped make the United States a land of opportunity. He promoted roads and canals. He used military force with Andrew Jackson for expansion and security. And he had helped play a major role in helping Andrew Jackson and the U.S. forces achieve victory at New Orleans and also in Lake Erie under Oliver Perry. He built the modern American military. He believed in wealth and security through strength. His wife, Elizabeth, was very beautiful. He was popular, reelected unanimously. Later in life, he had financial problems, and partly because he was not reimbursed for his expenses during his service in Europe, died destitute. He was a great American hero. God bless James Monroe. Thank you so much for watching. We're out of time. Hope you find a good book to read, and I'll see you next time.